Oh, hey there. It's your buddy Eddie O. Man, patterns have been everything. In this journey, recognizing patterns and observing them, you can almost see what's going to happen next. But there's nothing new under the sun, that's for sure. So anything that's still going on, I'm sure, is currently part of a pattern that exists to this day that we're going to attempt to break down and make a little more sense out of. Is Jerusalem, the Holy Land. You know, the city of Jerusalem was originally called Jebus, Jebus. That's right. And it was called the City of David. There's a lot to this in the Battle of the Holy Land, where Israel and Palestine, two countries, have territory and one city in the middle. There's two. There's another city that David was king of before he was the first king of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem, that city with the east wall, split right down there with Palestine and Israel. Islam and Judaism. Where does Christianity fit? How often did Catholicism rule Jerusalem? Their fair share for sure. The Vatican, Rome, Greece, and the absorption of Greece. A lot of action, a lot of stories. So some pictures I have are of where our last video left off in the year of 1860. A lot of these photos are going to be shown of Jerusalem. I'm going to jump out of our vision here. You want to get a look at me here? Please like and subscribe. Thank you for supporting me at Eddie O Knows. Follow me on YouTube for all these videos in long form. And a couple of shares would be great. Great way to share is to click on my bio, go to my page, repost one of my recent videos. That way it'll be out there on the feed. That'd be a great help. So as I disappear, alakazam. In the year 1860, the city of Jerusalem. Are you ready to go to Jerusalem? In the year 1860. Now, so many of my presentations here in my EdTalk, we see structures that have a lot of similarities in their construction styles, but there's certain cities and areas that get away without having to use the narrative. They don't have to pretend that these buildings were built between 1800 and 1875 or in the 19th century. Cities such as Rome and Jerusalem here was so long ago. Jerusalem, our oldest religion of the three, 3,000 years old. And a lot of this construction is that old in Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem. What we know as the Canaanites, right? The Canaanites, Canaan, is known as the Holy Land. The land of Canaan, of the Canaanites. Now, this wasn't a individual country, although this is in the Middle East where Palestine and Israel, both recent developments to the planetary borders. Israel, we're talking the 1900s, friends. Israel, 1900s. Muhammad, the beginning of Islam. The year 700, current era, is when Muhammad had his vision, transported from Mecca to this city of Jerusalem, to the mound, and did his ascension to heaven here in Jerusalem. So that's a big head start that supposed history tells us that Jewish tradition goes back 3,000 years, where we only have 1,300 years of Islam, the sovereign state of Palestine that is there. So when this was all known as Canaan, before the cities were built, of course, under the rule of the new king, the first king of Jerusalem was King David. That's right. King David, the star of Leonard Cohen's famous song, Hallelujah. Because I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. Now, Jerusalem was not called Jerusalem at this time. After ruling in a nearby city for 7 years, King David, son of Saul, the first king of Israel, they called it Israel at that time. It was called Davidian. Like David, it was the Davidian era. And Saul was the first leader of these original Israelites. What made these guys the true crew is because they were of the 12 tribes. David, his father Saul, his son Solomon, all the three kings, the first three, they were from the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah, when you hear people talking about the original Israelites and where they came from, the original Israelites were considered that specific Israel group because of the 12 tribes. They were from the tribe of Judah. Judah, Judah, Judah. So, all who claim right are probably just like the hero of Leonard Cohen's song. Hallelujah. And they're saying hallelujah because that's what David said with his harp and his music, the musical king who could open and close the locks of sigils, the three-dimensional chord keys. That's Solomon's keys, his son, and his tool, his weapon, was his ring. Solomon's ring on his finger? I don't know. I believe it was more like a ding-dong or ring-ring, a frequency where the sigils of the lesser, right? The lesser demons, the Gautier, just like that song. You didn't have to put me on. That band's name is Gautier, named after those cool necklaces and sigils that look like cool symbols with circles on them. But I digress. There was 19 other kings that followed in the Davidian era of Israel way back in the day, before Rome. Israel was ruled by Davidian until a day came and somebody came knocking on their door. And this guy, you've heard in the history books, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar came to this little town, which was called the city of David at this time, not Jerusalem. So the Babylonians, led by Nebuchadnezzar, would exile the Jews to Babylon. Say, get out of here. We're staying in Jerusalem. Now, we're going to call it Jerusalem. That's what the history books tell us. Now named City of David. So the Babylonians move in and change the name to Jerusalem. Sure. They didn't check their notes, but I digress. Now that this reign, where Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, exiled the Jewish to dilute their... They put them and separated the Jews that were sent to Babylon. One of those Jews that was exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem was Ezekiel. In the book of Enoch, Ezekiel had his visions of the opening of the sky when he was exiled to Babylon. And here at Jerusalem, some things happened here in Jerusalem, okay? A great pattern as we watch our patterns. The mound. They refer to it as the Temple Mound in Jerusalem, is where Jesus Christ, Yeshua, was crucified in Jerusalem on Temple Mound. And that's a pretty to-do in Catholicism and Christianity. That's a big to-do, that this city is very important, because when he was crucified, famously, this gentleman ascended into heaven. And the sky opened up and there he went. Okay, so Christianity, pick one now. Islam or Jew, because they both have a story too in Jerusalem, with a door, portal, gateway to heaven. The Jewish story is Jacob and Jacob's ladder. Jacob was traveling and had a vision. Angels flying down to the earth and up from the earth through a portal. Jacob's ladder. Sure, it had 33 steps in it, right? And this portal opened up in Jerusalem in his vision, on the mound where Jesus was crucified, and a portal also opened up right there. So we must be assuming now, in our 2024 mind of ley lines and vortexes and energy points of the earth, I did a little research. I said, is there a volcano or any history of volcanic action in Jerusalem? Looking for signs of a dormant tunnel system plasma volcano exit to our atmosphere from inner earth energy. The blue beams of light. I'm sure there's one in Ohio, Florida. These big points of energy, the biggest one being Mount Meru, Axis Mundi, makes sense. And it said, no, there's no research done to prove there is a volcano. Yet, it went on to say, this article, as I was asking about plasma sources or fountains of youth or energy sources or vortex or opening portals, the mineral systems and the energy levels and some other reasonings that had it akin to a volcano. Volcanoes are hollow tubes for plasma to flow through the earth. It's not supposed to be stuck in there. That would be a clogged artery like us. It would be like if it stopped flowing. They're all supposed to be open. All those tubes are going to pop right open. So wow, Jerusalem right there. Jerusalem, the portal opened, Jacob's ladder in the Jewish tradition. Jacob's vision himself, not to be confused with Daniel's visions on his way to Beth, not Bethlehem, but Beth. And now we have a third contender in the ring, is our prophet, Muhammad. May peace be with him forever. Muhammad, who showed up a little late to the party. We're talking, 700 AD after the fall of Rome. Muhammad lived a human life, lived until he was 63 years old, a human existence. But Muhammad was the prophet. And Muhammad teleported from Mecca. Mecca, not too far away now. It would be me in Massachusetts going to Chicago, 800 miles. So our Muhammad teleports. And where does he teleport to? Right here to Jerusalem, to the mound, Temple Mound. And what happens there? Just like Jacob's ladder, just like Christ's ascension to heaven. And you know what? We're going to add another one to go along with Muhammad's ascension in an opening in the heavens where he also traveled through that door, apparently in the same location that Jesus did. And Jacob's ladder allowed angels to fly in and out of the reality of these levels. So, if you've ever heard of the Assumption of Mary, a lot of churches, schools, the Assumption of Christ. The Assumption of Mary is that Mary, in body and spirit, was also brought to heaven through a portal, like ascended to heaven. Mary, that's right. All the way up. And guess where she was when this happened? That's right. On the Mound of Jerusalem. So what is truly here? Fascinated myself with tunnel systems and hotels in New York and Chicago and Detroit and underground systems. And it goes to reason that Mecca and Jerusalem and Beth are all connected through elaborate tunnel systems. And when we look at this construction, again, we don't have to play the game. They said they built these in the 1800s. This isn't a scenario of Argentina. No, some cities like Rome, that we have a narrative of thousands of years ago, that's when the construction was done. Although, I would assume, certain styles of construction just beg to believe that, Jerusalem in 1860 here, there was an excavation process very much like the Rome excavation in 1803 to 1864 here in Jerusalem. But of course, there was activity in Jerusalem because we know that it has been pulled and pushed and prodded and tugged and fought over by these three dominant forces of religion and ruler class system, gangs basically, and with so much in common with these stories of all the mound and how intertwined and interconnected and interwoven these three perspectives are of the same thing. What a sad state of affairs it goes in Jerusalem, known as prior to Israel and Palestine as Canaanites that lived there. In many city-states, it wasn't a defined country. With polytheism, were they drawn here? The sovereignty of the Muslim positioning of Palestine and claiming is much, much different than the perspective of the Israelites, especially when there are references out there to the true original Israelites of the 12 tribes. That would be the tribe of David, Saul, Solomon, for the tribe of Judah. Yet David's son, Solomon, was not the same lineage blood-wise as David. The mother of David's son, Solomon, had gone around and mixed her blood type, so to say. So these pure-blooded, very, very protective about their bloodline, David and akin. But who's to say? Who's to say? Here in Jerusalem, we do not have the luxury to say, oh, this was built in 2 years in Wisconsin. No, because the narrative of this story is that this was built thousands of years ago. It's doing pretty good, though. Pretty good construction, I would say. So how did this all start? When David was king, 19 kings that followed, and then Nebuchadnezzar, a man named Nebuchadnezzar, spell it twice, back and forward. Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonian tribes, which were basically Persian, not Muslim, not Christian or Catholic yet. No, of course not. That wouldn't come into tale until Rome had already absorbed Greece. So why don't we do a quick little hustle breakdown, if I can try and make a little sense out of this. So we can always go back to these videos on YouTube for our little history lessons, because we don't know where we're going if we don't know where we came from. And we can't prove otherwise unless we know what the story is thus far, right? So Jewish rule starts in 1000 BCE to approximately 586. Then the Persian Empire came in. Troy, Achilles there. They're Persian. You wouldn't think Brad Pitt's Persian, though, right? The Hellenistic era was when Helen was kind of playing both sides of the field. So it was the integration of the Greek Empire and then the Roman Empire, as you see, prior to the Byzantine Empire, which is nothing different than the Roman Empire. That is the Western Roman Empire. They call it the Byzantine Empire, and slid up towards Constantinople, and that's when they get their eyes on these prizes. So when Rome defeated Greece, right, in battle, not Troy. Troy was Persian. But Rome did conquer Greece. But instead of, they absorbed Greece. There wasn't really a conflict where one got defeated. It was an integration. Maybe it was all just one story, and they split it up into 2 stories. Anywho, after the Byzantine Empire had arose, we had different groups where the caliphates were an early incantation of the Ottoman Empire, a couple down. The Ottoman Empire means nothing more than Islamic and Muslim. I don't know why they chose the word Ottoman. It has some weird vagary and a distinct pattern of city-states. It wasn't even a cool thing. But they'll call the Crusaders by their first name. Worcester, Massachusetts, home of the Crusaders, Holy Cross Crusaders, my neighboring city. So there's our Catholic takeover. And what happened with the Abaduq and the Velmuk Sultanate? Those were Persian empires. Middle Eastern, we're talking. There were just some pushes because at this point in history, I believe, it was more of a sword-on-sword kind of situation. So here comes the Ottoman Empire. We see that page in our history books that we're taught. And then it kind of ends. The next page is just like, yeah, and then it's just the way it is. Because the British Mandate, right? Here we go. That's the Vatican. That's Great Britain. That's the British Mandate. And you know what they did when they took control and defeated the Ottoman Empire, which was, the Palestinian Islamic sovereign force that wanted to have some of this portal action on the mound. They relinquished Israel, tried to call it Israel again. Soon enough they would. right? Because it goes till 1948 with that British mandate. And then it says Israel, 1948, because they named it Israel because the British mandate handed it over to Geneva and our friends in Switzerland, right? Who are we talking about? Woodrow Wilson, a president, early, started the League of Nations, and that became the United Nations. Okay, so the British mandate took control of this area and said, hey, United Nations, which is now the World Economic Forum, right? Said, do something with this. And they said, okay, we're going to call it Israel again, just like it was in some story a million years ago, and we're going to do this. And Palestine is still sovereign and there, in their sovereignty. By all rights, they should be able to be. Of this powerful, powerful vortex of a place where Jesus Christ, Jacob's ladder, and Muhammad's ascension, and Mary's assumption to heaven have opened portals, Ezekiel's wheels, the Ophium, all right there in Jerusalem. What a hot spot. What a great spot to be. So now we see what's going on here because the British mandate is the Vatican. The Vatican was built long before the Christianity. They picked that one up and ran with it. So the Vatican is the British mandate. And the Vatican's Guard, the small army, the small Vatican Guard is in the same place in Geneva. And so, they've been in charge the whole time. Vatican does not answer to anybody. And that's for sure. It is a beautiful building in the Cave of Patriarchs. More and more we see the tunnel systems now. In the last couple of years here in Jerusalem, it's become a fun tourist attraction. You can go to the Western Wall and go under a tunnel over, there's the Temple Mount. Oh, original temple. Okay, this is like, what are you guys doing? This, guys, you want to we can go in the shops, the stones, the street. It sounds like fun. Intricate cities. We call them tunnels. What if they weren't underground? Well, then we wouldn't call them tunnels. We would call them cities. If that makes sense. Hey, Billy Badass. Thanks for stopping by, brother. But here in Jerusalem, at these times, in the construction, not in the 1800s like our other narratives we can tear apart. No, we're talking 2,500 years ago with great amounts of excavation, very akin to Rome and how Rome was excavated. This is just according to the history books. This will be a referral episode where I can go back and check the history out. In the reign of Nero, there was a reign of Nero. Nero tried to build something very close to the Tower of Babylon and judging God and his Roman Empire when he was the ruler of Rome for 40 years. There was some storylines with some really awful leaders. Romulus and Remus were twin brothers. Rome was named after Romulus after he took his brother out. And they were divine beings, both sons of the god Mars. They were demigods of the city of Rome. Same thing with Jerusalem. When I look at these buildings, the architecture, and, who am I to say? I don't see much difference in a lot of the ideas of the tunnel work, the infrastructure, dome. There are star forts nearby. So to say that those buildings in Detroit were definitely not built in 1892 to 1893 and a half, right? I think it's fair to say that's as off as saying
Yes, these buildings were built here in Jerusalem in the year 592 BC. Oh, where are they, Bob? Look at the size of the people. And if something's so far in the past, for some reason, it's executable. It's like, oh yeah, they did that. But break it down to 1700s and say, hey, there's no power tools. It's just donkeys and candles and some wax and a bunch of tetanus shot stuff. Kind of, it's like no soap. It's impossible. But you go back to 2,500 years ago, Jerusalem, the great city, of course, originally the city of David. Is that a fact? Still looking the weather of the situations, the events that happened to so many of these cities and constructions. It wasn't all setups and great fires and EMP electrical waves and subsequent planned out, plotted removal of architecture. The apocalypse part of the events, the Carrington event in the 1800s, the event coming up soon, our plasma volcano that'll erupt into breaking Humpty Dumpty's seal up top and atmospheric pressure. This was the very first McDonald's in Israel. No, I'm just kidding. Of course. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. This isn't the greatest example, but whenever you're looking at pictures and trying to line up construction dates and reality timelines and such, when you see trees next to buildings, how long did that tree take to grow there? So if they claim that this was just finished, a building and such, but we know the story for Jerusalem, the construction, and so surrounding towns of Jerusalem, nope, very similar structures, but nope. So recognizing the pattern of Jerusalem and how it comes up over and over again in history, always fighting over, everybody's fighting for the promised land, right? What a perfect civil war. The three major religions all had experiences on that same area. It could have been Arizona and portals, all witnessed the same miracles from three different angles. So it's three different situations. We know perspective and perception and observation and these tools and utilization. Once we realize one is just as useful or meaningless as the next in all legitimacy, there is no difference in any of it. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. And we see this, some half-excavated such, in the timeline of 1860 when these black and white photos were taken. Was this a process? There's no people here. There's no construction. There's no tools of any sort. These are the photos that we see in the 1800s, late 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s, which I refer to as real estate catalogs for the resets and whatnot, repopulation efforts. Vanilla skies, no population. You see a couple people sometimes, but they stick out like a sore thumb. They're always wearing their bowling caps. So these buildings we know are meant to last forever, but it looks a little wonky here. Was there a plasma event, a meltology, a heavy electrical event, a plasma event? Was this done with frequency weapons? Because I would imagine these bricks were a lot sharper at one point in time, Say every single mountain and all the land. Yes, the Carrington event paradise, that's right. They say in the Carrington event, because of the atmospheric change and the amount of plasma integrated, it creates phantazoids. And that's when plasma energy, life force essentially, when negative and positive ions and ionized oxygen and ionized carbon meet, it creates this life force. So it would go into machines. And if the machine is shaped in a form where it could move like a marionette, that marionette would move. That's where zombies come from. And the bodies of the undead, and the undead will rise at that time because of the energy of the plasma that is abundant in our atmosphere once it gets depressurized, when the top of the Humpty Dumpty cracks and breaks and falls down and breaks and can't put it back together again. All the king's horses and all the king's men did try, but they could not seal that piece of ice glass back up, and had to wait for a new one to form, if you catch my drift. But it's a cycle. Tick tock, my friends. We're all aware of these patterns, and we can observe them. And it's like being a good musician. We have to get in rhythm, in the beat, in the groove. That way, we'll hit that downbeat, so we know. Shuffling through these pictures, I say this is many examples of many different places. But the three events, of course: the ascension of Christ, the ascension of Muhammad after he teleported from Mecca to Jerusalem on the same mound, the Assumption of Mary ascended from the mound, and Jacob's ladder in Judaism. In Judaism, God lives here. This is where God lives. Underground, what's underneath? What was Nebuchadnezzar digging for? Why did so many great leaders, and how many of these mongrel or Canaanite or barbarian or Tartarian tribes from the north, the crazy ones, the ones that did not make sense, the Vongals, the Vangals, mongrels, right? The strong ones from the north, the high north. Yeah, make fun of them in your storybook. They heard there was a secret chord David played, please the Lord. And David's son, the half-blooded Solomon, is the main character in that song, Hallelujah. And he's viewing the wife just as David's wife was being viewed by the Persian king at the time. And David did not impregnate his wife to keep that bloodline when Solomon was born. That's right. He saw her bathing on the roof. And she tied him to the chair, cut his throne, cut his hair, and they did the diddly. And now, the child, Solomon, wasn't really David's son. It was the mix. The blood was mixed. And that's the story about Jerusalem. Thank you guys very much for joining me on this EdTalk. I enjoyed doing my research, and it's all steps in the right direction. I would imagine that Jerusalem is probably part of this storyline. Those pillars, those centers. But it's been a struggle. It's been a tug of war. Hey guys, please follow my YouTube channel, subscribe, like, follow my work. Big shout out to all the other great creators here searching for New World information: Lucas Aurelian, Divergent, Jordan Levy, and all you guys. Hey, peace, paradise, man. Keeping it real, brother. Speaking, finding these truths out as we can go. Keep asking questions, everybody. Much love.